Charles was our Sunday school leader and a Bible. I mean, he studied the Bible. He knew the Bible, and it was a primary purpose of him was to get us into the Bible and study what God's Word meant. And a lot of times he would be, or you can ask some of the other guys who was in our class, he would be 3 pages ahead of where we was at. We was trying to find out where he was going or what he was doing. But he would always go back and get us caught up. But Charles was our Sunday school director, and we really appreciated the amount of time he put into the Bible study. And he would take you from just pick out one word in the scripture and said, let's trace this through the Bible and see what this word means. That was Charles. And I mean, it was an in-depth Bible study, and we really, really enjoyed it. Yeah. Well, Charles was an example. He, of course, later he was on a cane, but on Wednesday night, when we have Wednesday night Bible study, he would go by and pick up Cecil Cheney. And here's 2 older seniors, both on canes, but Bible study was important. And Charles would go pick them, because he's going to make Bible study. Even in times when he didn't feel like getting out, it still was important to be at Bible study. And that's what Charles, and I think it was an example to a lot of the younger generation to see these 2 older men get out walking on canes, but they still got out and come to church and made Bible study. That was important to them.
I admired Colleen. She was a good example of the old saying, bloom where you're planted. And she worked at the Kaufman courthouse. And there one day she was told about twin baby girls in a very bad environment. She and her husband took them that very day into their home. They adopted them and raised them as their children. And to me, this was an example of compassion and living where you're planted in your community. Colleen loved her church. One of our ladies that was here back in the 60s told that Colleen was very faithful until her health failed her. She remembered back in the 60s that one Sunday morning, Colleen played the piano and Cindy and Sandy sang. And she said they were just little girls at that time, but she recalled they were faithful and a big part of their church. And up until the last days when we would go to see Colleen there in the nursing home, she would always be glad to see us, and she would always say, "And how are things down at the church?" And then we would begin to tell her God's blessings on FBC.
Okay, let me tell you about my friend Mary Reed. She moved to Kaufman in the late 1970s, early 1980s, as she retired from Dallas Independent School District. She was a bus driver, and she drove the students who were disabled. And because of that, she developed a love for those less fortunate. And then she and her husband adopted 2 children and raised those children. When she moved to Kaufman, she, along with her sister Maureen Ross and her sister Linda Shell and their families, they joined First Baptist Church. And she and her husband were a member of Al Pryor's Sunday school class. When he passed away, then she joined the Joy ladies class. That's when I met her, because that's what I teach, is the Joy ladies class. When she was in her late 70s, early 80s, she didn't adopt, but she was a foster parent to Kenneth and Caitlin, her grandchildren. She took care of those kids. She put them in Kaufman Christian School. She made sure they came to all of the church activities and all school activities. But, you know, she's a single mother on a fixed income, and so she wanted to dress the kids with high-end materials. And she found this secondhand store in Garland that she could get high-end materials for a small price. I'm going to look for that, because that sounds like a good idea, and she did a good job with that. While she was in Dallas, she not only drove the bus, but she played in several bowling leagues, and that was what she did for fun. I understand she had a bowling average of 179. Now, between you and me, that's supposed to be really, really good. So, you know, that was what she enjoyed. But later on in life, she began to fall. And she would break things when she fell. She broke her hip, she broke her arm, her elbow, her ribs, and it was determined that that happened because when she was 70 years old, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And they did a special treatment called cobalt treatment. It was before any chemo, and that damaged her bones. Now, the doctor told her when she was diagnosed that she had 6 months to live. Now, Mary was very determined, very focused, and she was determined that that was not going to stop her, and it didn't. She lived 50 years after that. Mary was a very shy person, and she did not enjoy large crowds, but she cared for those less fortunate, and she contributed to society in that way, and that's why she was my friend.
Met Danny in the Bobby Rich Sunday School class. When we first started going here, we'd selected that class to go to, and he was just part of that class. And I noticed right off the bat with him that he was very friendly. He came across with a quiet demeanor about him, but you know, he was just friendly to everybody. I remember one time he came into Sunday school, and Bobby had already started. But he, you know, we probably had about 16 people there, you know. He went through every person, shaking their hand, you know, and talking real quiet, you know, how you doing, you know. So it was, but that's just the type guy he was. He kind of became our de facto social guy, you know, where he would arrange our outings to go eat, which was pretty easy for us because we all like catfish. So every other time it was catfish probably, but he did that, and he also, another thing I remember in the class, you know, if you'd come in and someone would always bring donuts, and if someone forgot, then Bobby'd get ready to start, and then someone would say, "Where's Danny?" And Carolyn would say, "He's gone to get donuts." So he always kept us, you know, kept us in donuts. So anyway.
When I think about Christina, I think of her as kind of just a miracle child. You know, she had odds stacked against her at a really young age. She overcame challenges just continually, you know, day to day, every day. There was a challenge, and so yeah, she made it to, you know, her later years in life. Became a mom when that was something that was never really considered a possibility for her, and she brought this child into the world, and she was an awesome mom to her, and to Adeline, who she knew, you know, when she was, you know, she became part of her life when she was really young, and so I just think of her as a miracle, having overcome all of those challenges with such fight, and you know, at the same time, still continuing to try to do all of the normal things and the mom things and the wife things that she loved to do. She tried to pursue school, and that was hard. You know, when you're sick all of the time, you know, it's not really possible to do those things. But she, you know, she tried and she fought through every challenge, and still succeeded in being a mom and having this life that she created for her and John. I was just always amazed at how she just kind of kept rolling. You know, the hospital visits got to be closer and closer and closer together. You know, when we would go visit, and for her it was just kind of like, you know, everyday life. You know, I don't think there was ever a time, you know, that I came and visited her where there was like a give up spirit in the room, you know, when she could have easily like just said, I'm done with this, I just want to be done. But I think she fought to the very last minute.
She was my friend, and we would text back and forth, and when I had a problem, she had an answer, and when she had a problem, I would give her advice, but I don't think I had any answers for her. But she was really devoted to her family and her grandchildren. That's where her focus lay. I know when the porch started, and on Wednesday nights, the kids would buy pizza for $2 a slice, she sold pizza to all the kids, and she did that for years. And she worked in that area, and that's the only area that I know that she was very focused in. She also sewed things. She sewed uniforms for Kemp School District for the drill team and the band people. You know, Jimmy came to her one time and he said, I have 100 band kids that need their hymns all sewed up. And so she did that. When it came to the masks, she started making masks, and that was back in March. And she was diagnosed with leukemia in June. And I don't know how many hundreds of masks that she made. But somebody donated a big roll of elastic, and she used all that elastic up. So if somebody needs something sewn, she would handle that. She was good at that. She was an excellent seamstress. She and I formed an encouragers class for ladies who had just lost their husbands, and you know, you're kind of like a fish out of water, and we would meet once a month, and she organized that, and she would put on the best luncheons, and then we would schedule field trips, and we would go places, and we did that for a couple of years, but she organized that.
I have we used to read poetry. I used to read her poems, and sometimes she would tell me a poem. But if I didn't say anything about Judith and just read the poem, then everyone would know who Judith was. This is the name of the poem. It's a Helen Steiner Rice poem, but it's Look on the Sunny Side. There are always two sides, the good and the bad, the dark and the light, the sad and the glad. But in looking back over the good and the bad, we're aware of the number of good things we've had. And in counting our blessings we find when we're through, we've no reason at all to complain or be blue. So thank God for good things He has already done, and be grateful to Him for the battles you've won. And know that the same God who helped you before is ready and willing to help you once more. Then with faith in your heart, reach out for God's hand and accept what He sends, though you can't understand. For our Father in heaven always knows what is best, and if you trust in His wisdom, your life will be blessed. For always remember that whatever betide you, you are never alone, for God is beside you. And I feel like that's the epitome of her, that's the way she felt, that's the way she believed, that's the way she walked in her life. And she was a blessing to me. She was a blessing to our class. She was a blessing to this church in the way that she walked in the Lord and lived her life. And I don't know that she was out and about in the community too much because she was very frail. But anybody that knew Judith, there was no unkind word. There was no downside to Judith's life. She walked in the Lord. She trusted in Him. And she knew that He was beside her in the good times and the bad. I only wish I could be a little bit close to that.
Well, Paul was my friend. I was just honored to be able to call him my friend, and he was the type of man that if you seen him on Sunday and you seen him on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, he was the same. He never changed. Very devout Christian. And he was the type that you hear a lot of people say in passing, if there's anything I can do for you, just call. When Paul said that, he meant it. And you could call him at any time, and it wasn't, let me check my schedule. It was, what time do I need to be there? And that's the way Paul was. And I'm hopefully that our friendship, that I was able to repay him some in his latter days when he was unable to get out and go and help other people, that we was able to help him. And that's who Paul was to me. He was a very good, dear friend. And I just was really honored to get to know him. Well, Paul, to his church, he was the type that if you had a business meeting and he disagreed with what was going on, he would state it. But if the majority said, this is what we're going to do, Paul was the first one to get on the bandstand and said, let's do it. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. And that's the way Paul was. And he started a ministry that's still going on today that we was part of. It was Handy Helpers, which was the one where we go out and help seniors of our church staff, our church body. And there was a lot of them. If you just ask a lot of the seniors, they know who Paul is. And even in his latter days, when he was unable to get out and work, when he's in his bed, he would still take calls and coordinate for the rest of us to go and help seniors if whatever they needed done. And if he was still able to get out and drive, he would go and pick up supplies for us for handrails or smoke detectors, whatever we needed. And that was Paul. And it was a passion for him to help seniors, and that's what he did to the very end. Well, when you met Paul, he was genuine, and they knew it. And Paul, even the Handy Helpers, even though it was set up for our church body, for our seniors, it wasn't only here in the church. It was other people here in town, in the community, that the word to get back to Paul, he said, let's go do this. They're not church members, but let's witness to them. This is a good witness. Let's go minister to them. They need help. Let's go help them. And that was Paul, and a lot of people in the community knew him. And they knew that he was genuine, and what we was doing was out of the heart of a minister. I mean, he was really, really passionate about helping others. And that was Paul.
Well, our friend Jimmy Polk was an enigma for sure. He loved NASCAR and hunting, but he could also be found in the worship center on a Sunday morning wearing a suit and conducting a choir and orchestra. There were lots of people who could have spoken on his behalf because he spent so many years here ministering at FBC Kaufman, and we have some quotes from just a few of the people whose lives he touched while he was here. From Melissa McCaleb, Jimmy's belief in and encouragement of my gift inspires me to serve with a sense of confidence and boldness I may not have otherwise found. For that, I will always be grateful. From Julie Gensel, I was privileged to sing with Jimmy for about 19 years, and I feel so blessed. His voice was amazing, and he was so incredibly gifted in many areas. He was a lot of fun, and yet could turn and be very serious about the music in the blink of an eye. We went on countless mission trips together, and he would always prod me along at the back of the line to make sure everyone was accounted for. I miss him so much, and I thank God that he was a part of my journey in this life. From Kay Williams, Jimmy Polk definitely had an impact in my life over the years in so many ways. We met through music many years ago, and he and Melinda immediately felt like family to me. I have said many times that Jimmy was the most talented musician I ever knew. When I made that comment to him, he would shake his head and say, Cameron is so much better than me. And then we'd discuss his amazingly gifted children. I would call Jimmy frequently for advice on technology, music theory, spiritual matters, family counseling, you name it. I trusted his advice, and he was responsible for me coming to FBC Kaufman to be the pianist for the traditional service. He was a friend who cannot be replaced, and I miss him all the time. I will forever be grateful that I was fortunate enough to have had him in my life. Well, our church and our community are forever blessed by Jimmy's life, his gifts, and the legacy that he has left here in his family.